It's not in the face! Thank you.
Hello and welcome to Hey, Not the Face with your host, John Nash, and your producer, me, Steffi Haynes. And today we are going to talk about Zuffa Boxing, and we are going to talk about Dana White. These are the two biggest topics that are making the media waves this current news cycle. It's Monday night, September 29th, when we're recording. And John, we had some big news today. But first, I'm going to check in with you and see how you're doing. And I'm also going to remind everybody to subscribe with a paid subscription so that they have access to all of our content. Because as you and I both know, we like to put things behind a paywall. But how are you?
Fairly good. There's some news today. Something happened today.
I know.
I was not aware. I was at work all day. I wasn't paying attention.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
I'm
don't
just
believe
kidding.
you.
No, my phone was just blowing up, and I'm like, listen. People are like, "What's this? What's this?" I'm like, "What? What am I going to tell you? I'm not a member of Zuffa's round table, sitting in the secret meetings. So I don't know why you guys are calling me, but they were. So that was my day. Way to interrupt my work. Way to get me fired, people.
Yeah, and you were at the office today too. What a day for the news to break is while you're at the office.
No, it was good. I needed the break. It was a tiring day at work because nothing was happening. I don't want to get into my work, but it was a boring episode I was working on my show, and it was real. I would have fallen asleep today if I did not have this news to wake me up.
Well, let's get down to brass tacks then, because as I mentioned, the announcement was finally made today that Zuffa Boxing would be going to Paramount Plus. Now, what are the details of that deal as we know it, since the press release didn't really let on too much? So very little information came out.
Well, yeah, based on the press release, what it told us is that starting in January 2026, Paramount will be the exclusive distributor of the Zuffa Boxing events, and they're going to have 12 events, one per month. But there are plans to grow that going forward. That in the press release, it said that. So they're going to start with 12 for next year and then going forward. And it's all going to be available on the Paramount's direct-to-consumer streaming platform, which I believe is, $10 a month right now, $12 a month. We've gone over that before, and I keep forgetting the amount, but it's not super expensive compared to, you're going to get UFC already. Most people listening to this are probably going to subscribe for the UFC content, so you'll get it with that. But some select events will be simulcast on CBS. So that's pretty big considering that there's not any, network boxing on right now. And Zuffa is going to have network boxing, although, they said it's going to be mostly kind of a development promotion, right? So I don't know why CBS would want to put those on network TV. You don't want to put your Showbox cards on network TV. I don't know, you get the ratings, but if they are going to put it on CBS, that's pretty big news. But the biggest news is probably, I think what makes it so big is more so who's involved, TKO and the Saudis, more so than the announcement itself.
Let me ask you this. Do you think that the ones that'll end up on network TV might be something to do with Canelo or Bud Crawford, since they both have contracts with the Saudis?
Well, that's possible, but Saudis, remember the Riyadh season cards that Canelo, I think, is signed with, is a separate entity from Zuffa Boxing. So you would think that those would be on the Riyadh season cards, which they want to put on Netflix and not on Paramount. But maybe I do think it's possible, as much as they're talking about, and I'm sure we'll get into this later in the show, so I'll go to more detail later. But as much as they're talking about as a feeder system, or not a feeder, or a development system, young boxers are going to build from the ground up. I do think there's a good chance that that's only partly their plan, and they might have bigger shows planned with bigger boxers, and those they might put on CBS. Because again, I just don't see, what kind of ratings are you going to get with, the Calum Walshes of the world.
Let me ask you one more question, and hopefully I don't cause you to reveal anything for a later answer. But do you think that they could possibly expand within 2026? I know that they said after 2026 they look at expansion of more than those 12 events. But do you think we might end up with more than 12 events
I
in?
mean, 2026, I think that's possible. I mean, I think 12 is the plan, but they are flexible. I think a lot of it's going to depend on what happens with some certain legislation that's been proposed. And, what happens there might dictate how many more events they might want to start adding.
All right. Let's talk about an interview that Dana White gave to Brian Campbell. What did you think of his take on that Ali Act bill proposal, the Muhammad Ali American Boxing Revival Act?
Well, it's pretty clear that the talking points that they have about changing the Ali Act have been drilled into his head because he hit the talking point, namely that it doesn't change a word of the Ali Act. As he said to Campbell, Mr. Campbell, our devout, my big enemy here, it's a kind of a running gag. He's a heel to my baby face. As Brian Campbell brought up, is that they're going to propose this Ali Act and change. And Dana White said, we are not changing a word of the Ali Act, which is technically true. But what they're doing, which I would say modifies the Ali Act, is one is you're adding language, which actually improves the Ali Act. You're adding language to the Ali Act section about minimum pay and about the coverage that's required. That's all positives. But in the Professional Boxing Safety Act, which seems done intentionally so they can make the claim that they're not changing the Ali Act, they are introducing a section that lets them skirt the Ali Act, give a waiver from any of the provisions in the Ali Act with these UBOs. And so he's making the argument that we are not changing a word, and boxers, again, this is their other great thing. Boxers will have a choice. They can either go with the traditional system if they want to be protected by the Ali Act. He doesn't use the word protected, of course. Or they can, have faith in me and sign up with Zuffa Boxing. And that's presented in a way that I'm sure a lot of fans, a lot of listeners, a lot of casuals, people outside in the Congress will hear that and say, oh, that's great. What's wrong with choice? But if you're aware of the history of boxing, if you're aware of what the Ali Act intends to do, I think that's kind of that presentation masks the true purpose or the true risk, because one of the provisions in the Ali Act is the protection against coercive contracts. Now, boxers right now might have a choice to freely go with Zuffa Boxing, but the problem comes in the future when another boxer comes up and the most lucrative fight possible for him is fighting someone in Zuffa Boxing, and he wants that fight. And Zuffa Boxing uses the leverage to access to that fight, potentially against the biggest name in the sport, or access to the title because maybe Zuffa is finally successfully has the number one title. But what happens is then they can use the leverage they have for these big fights to get that fighter to sign on with them for additional fights. So yes, the fighters right now all have a choice. It's the future fighters that might not have a complete free choice if this is passed, because the coercive contract provision will now no longer exist, be applied to those that have UBOs.
Wouldn't that also mean that the fighters that are signed to Zuffa would end up in a very restrictive contract similar to what the UFC has?
Yeah, I mean, they already have their contracts run several years, but they also, not only in a current restrictive contract with Zuffa Boxing, you're agreeing to that, which everybody's agreeing to. I mean, that's one of the things, but you're signed to it. But the beauty of that too is you're already in the UBO. So if the bill passes, those boxers in the UBO, and they are again free to use coercive contract provisions to basically extract even more fights out of those fighters, because they can do things like, offer the only good fights for that boxer is they'll only offer to you if you sign an extension with them, and they are not covered by they will not be covered by the Ali Act going forward. So the talking point that they give, that one, They're not changing a word of the Ali Act. Technically true. I give them a lot of points on that. That they have they're out in a technicality on that, and also that fighters have a choice. Yes, those both apply now, but I think if you just look slightly deeper into the issue, you'll see that doesn't hold up to scrutiny. But good job of whoever crafted those talking points, because how many people are that interested in the subject that they want to go just beyond the surface to see how this will truly impact boxing? Very few. So I think those talking points will work.
What did you think about his comments of not working with other boxing promoters?
Well, this again, not a surprise, because Dana White, never as the head of the UFC, doesn't work with other promoters. We know that. We also know he said repeatedly he's not going to work with other promotions, and so I just think, again, it's not a surprise, but again, it kind of reveals, I guess, a weakness of what they're trying to do, or I should say, not a weakness, but their arguments kind of fall on its face, because the big problem with boxing is we have too many titles, not the right people get champion fights, and the promoters won't work together right to put on the big fights. Well, if he's a development promotion, if he's just developing fighters, well, if he's not going to work with other promoters, how are we ever going to get these guys to a point where we can see them in big fights, right? And that's a problem. In other words, he's creating another barrier that everybody's been complaining about. Oh, no one will cross the street. Well, he's not having a street blocking the other promoters. He's building a whole molten wall. So there's no possibility of working with the other promoters. So, my takeaway is people look at the UFC and they think, oh, we want what the UFC has. But the difference is UFC, as we know, has a monopoly in all practical purposes. 90% of the market, supposedly, the revenue generated goes to them. They have all the top fighters. They're just, there's no need to, go across the street in MMA because they have complete control. And everybody says, oh, we want something like that in boxing where we can see the best versus the best. But the best are not all under control of one promoter. And so you're not going to get that. This is just putting up a barrier that I'm kind of surprised that people do not look at this and go, great, we have another, instead of a street, we have a multi-lane freeway blocking access between these fighters as they're on other sides of the pass. So I do not see how this solves the problem that the biggest fights are not being made because the promoters are not working together. The only way this works, if somehow you eliminate the other promoters and all the fighters have no options but to work with this new entity.
He did an interview with Max Kellerman as well, and he said that Zuffa Boxing will have their own belts, but they'll also only be recognizing the Ring Magazine title and none, absolutely zero, of the other sanctioning bodies' belts. What does that mean for Zuffa Boxing, and what does that mean for the sanctioning bodies?
This is the Inside the Ring show that they have. This was an interview with Max Kellerman, but it's Inside the Ring is their, the show that they're doing now. It seems intentionally designed to trigger me because you have Kellerman, you as well. As I know Kellerman, I've been a big fan of him on broadcasts, less so the most recent one, but on the interviews, I'm not a fan of his talking. And there was a lot, as the kids say, glazing going on in this, on their show. And then he combined him with Mike Coppinger. And it was nothing but accolades and a presentation, that I don't fully disagree with. They complained immensely about the sanctioning organizations, the problem with the sanctioning organizations. And you can look through things I've written and what I've said on the show, interviews I've done. I've been very against the sanctioning organizations, very negative, down on sanctioning organizations for a long time since I appeared on the forums. And I've always complained for years now that the sanctioning organizations are the number one problem with boxing. And their solution they offer, though, seems like they've gone through the mirror universe to pick the dark side against me, and then with the Star Trek world to pick the most villainous version of how to fix it. Because I've always said there's multiple ways we could fix the sanctioning organization problem, and they choose the one. They seem to always say we want the one where the one promoter gets monopoly power and makes all the money and takes all the money from everybody else. So that's my problem. That was my experience listening to their show and as well as the interview. But as Dana White explains, we get to the titles. What's also I found amusing is the whole argument is we just need one title in boxing. If we have just one title, if we do that, it fixes our problems. Okay, that's great. But what they're presenting, as they said here, as what Max Kellerman was so excited about, is they're going to have the Zuffa Boxing title. And then that Zuffa Boxing champ might go on to fight the Ring Magazine champ. And so, well, you're not talking about one title that's kind of the number one belt that everybody acknowledges. You're talking about basically Zuffa Boxing is going to be like the WBC silver title to the Ring Magazine belt. So now we've introduced one new title. We're not making it one title. We're adding two additional titles, which was everybody's complaint. Now we're going to have more titles. And they're not going to work with other promoters, so no one's going to fight for their titles except for their boxers. And so you're putting up, these walled gardens and making more barriers for crossing over and having a true champion. And so that was my take, is you're not, again, fixing the problem. The only way this fixes is a solution is if it does something they seem to claim won't happen. All the supporters are like, oh, there can't be a monopoly in boxing. It's impossible to monopolize boxing. There's too much competition. But at the same time, isn't that what you want to happen as see a monopoly? Because you guys are arguing that the goal should be only one titles. That's it. And these one titles are apparently owned by, conveniently, the company that's paying your guys' bills, Coppinger and Kellerman. That should be the one title. And so the only way that would be the one title if they effectively monopolize boxing. So everybody took that to be the one title. That was worth winning. And so again, there's this, there is, all these people are making an argument or making claims, but it only works if the worst case scenario does come true, that someone monopolizes the sport. But it seems like that's what they want, is someone to monopolize it, but they don't seem willing to say we want a monopoly, and we want that monopoly to be a company that basically dictates all the terms and stuff like that. So again, just more fuel for fodder for people like me to go nuts on this stuff.
Dana was making the rounds this week because not only did he interview with Brian Campbell and Max Kellerman, he did a big feature, a full 20-minute feature on 60 Minutes that came out last night. I have a feeling I know what you're going to say because you're a stickler for history, but I got to know what stood out to you the most about the interview.
Well, first I want to know one thing about Brian Campbell's interview, because I know there's a lot of people give him a hard time, Mr. Campbell, because he seemed very, polite, non-confrontational. But I think people kind of miss one thing. Brian was non-confrontational, right? He seemed very friendly to Dana White. But am I the only one that noticed that he basically asked all the questions that Zettel wanted answered? Remember when Dana White called him an asshole?
Yeah.
He got all the questions in. And I think that, you're in a hard position because he does work for CBS, Brian Campbell. And he is dealing with someone that probably is, will not take well to what seem like tough questions. But I thought he did a very good job of sneaking those in, but seeming very friendly when he did it. So I just wanted to note that. Now, 60 Minutes, the old days of Wallace and all them, those are long gone, because this was very friendly for. I mean, I understand 60 Minutes is doing a profile. That's the type of genre of interviews they do and are not quite as hard hitting. But still, at 60 Minutes, you'd think they would push them on certain issues that are, they raised all the questions, but they didn't push him on any of them. And I don't mean like they have to push him to the point where there's a shouting match and there's just this, just a confrontational adversarial interview. But they could have important subjects, important questions they could have pushed harder on, and gotten, I think, a more better answers, more complete answers than they got. So my biggest, what stood out to me the most is just how friendly the interview was. And you can't ignore the fact that, I should note, this interview obviously was started and done over a period of time long before Paramount bought or signed the deal with UFC. But at the same time, you can't ignore that the people that took over Paramount are obviously on friendly terms with TKO, Endeavor, and now have signed a deal with the UFC. In fact, some of the questions, there seemed to be a lot of editing on some of Damon White's answers. I'd be interested to see what the raw footage looked like, because you can't help but wonder how much involvement management has this new deal with the UFC and TKO Boxing now, how much input they had on the interview to make it as glossy as possible, because they do not want to offend their new partner. And they wanted basically to do a sales pitch. Again, it just did not feel like the 60 minutes of lore, that's for sure.
I mean, it started with the interviewer talking about how him and Dana have known each other for a long time. Dana even said, "We've known each other forever. I'm going to give it to you straight. Ask anything you want." That was how they opened it. They opened it by talking about how they were friends.
Well, the interviewer, he is the author of Blood in the Cage, or the book so he's been around for a while. That I don't know how close they are. If they did have a personal friendly relationship, it wouldn't be. I mean, in some ways, they had hired Josh Gross. Dana White could have said the same thing. We've known each other forever, but I'm sure the relationship would be there'd be a little more friction. And I think I would count on Josh Gross pushing for some more tougher questions.
For sure. What did he say about fighter pay, and what did you think of it?
Well, that was one of the ones. Now, again, you don't have to make the whole episode about fighter pay, but there seemed to have been no pushback or investigation at all by 60 Minutes on this, because the comment on fighter pay was, oh, these guys make first of all, he asked, will fighters see their pay double? And Dana White didn't give a complete answer. Okay, that's fine. You might not have the information yet. But he kind of let it pass. Dana White did his own argument. No one knows what these guys make. And that's not true. Unless the UFC, Zuffa, TKO, Dana White, all of them, unless they lied during the antitrust trial, right? Unless they lied to the courts, we know for large portions of the company's period, we know what they paid their fighters. We also know, not just during the class period from 2010 to 2017, or even earlier, the pay goes back to 2001. Every year, the total. But we have individual purses for fighters during the leap period. But we know what all the fighters made from mid 2016 until early 2023. That's pretty recent. So we know what the fighters make. So when he says no one knows what these guys make, as if there's, again, secret bonuses and all this money floating around, that's not really true. We might not know current fighters what their current deals are, or exact numbers for them. But we do know what all the fighters are making, and we also know what their revenue is. So we can get a wage share even of more recent date. We also, specifically during the class period, we know exactly from your own internal documents what percentage of the revenue you were paying the fighters and exact amounts you were paying the fighters. So we know a great deal. So I'm always kind of surprised when people don't push back on that, because we might not know everything, but we know a lot. It's not like we're blind on this. So when he claims, when Dana White says no one knows anything, that's false. Unless, again, you've been lying to us. You've been lying to Judge Boulware and the courts. I don't think that's true, though. I think you've been pretty honest with them. I'm guessing you have been.
Did he have anything different to say in that interview than the one he gave to Brian Campbell? And when I say different, impactful is, I guess, what I'm going for.
Well, he brought up the fighter pay in this one, but again, he didn't even talk about fighter pay. It was a brief comment. Someone asked me, I think it was you actually, asked me, did you see the comments about fighter pay? And I'm like, the 35-second clip? Yes, I saw the whole thing. They noted the antitrust suit and that. I give them somewhat credit, they brought it up, but that seems to be the bare minimum to make it look like we tried for 60 Minutes. But for the interview, I mean, I think there was just much more detail. Again, Campbell was not pushing back, being adversarial, but there was more detail about the Ollie Act. We got details out of him where for 60 minutes, I mean, really it was just Rob Joyner, again, going to give him a shout out. I'm getting tired of shouting you out, Rob, because I'm giving you way too much credit. But he had a point, called it the Jeremy Botter effect, or something like that. When he brought up Jeremy Botter, talked about how as you recover Dana and you hang out, he brings you out with him, and he brings you on this kind of this exciting night where you go everywhere. Everything's first class, everything's really glamorous, and you go gambling, and just the excitement of watching this guy just bet huge amounts of money. And you get kind of enamored with that and enraptured. And so your reporting kind of changes. So you start covering in a positive way because just the excitement level, it overtakes you. And I felt that some of that maybe happened with the 60 Minutes interview where, Botter did point out later that he woke up to it and like, God, I gotta be more impartial because this is kind of hypnotizing me when I cover him. And so that felt like it happened with 60 Minutes where with the other 60 CBS interview with Campbell, I think we got, even though, again, he tried to be as friendly as possible to Dana White, we got some details out of him that we did not get. We got nothing out of that 60 Minutes interview.
Do you think it was a little bit over the top for 60 Minutes to dedicate time to his gambling? Because they did dedicate a little segment of that interview to him being at the tables and losing down bad and then coming back and blah, blah, blah.
Well, I think that's what Joyner was talking about with the Botter effect. The idea that they went out with him, they're going to do this piece, and they got enamored with the excitement of the amount of gambling he was doing. And also, again, there's no proof, but it does feel like this was an intentional. The piece was there to cast him in a very nice light. Let's put it that way. I think it was done intentionally that way because they are friendly and that they might have known for a while they plan to do business, or we don't know what the original piece was like. Maybe this was re-edited, whatever, but you can't ignore the fact that they are on CBS, and CBS has gone through some massive changes in the last couple of years. Their news department is not the news department of just a few years ago. And
let's not forget that Donald Trump was suing 60 Minutes and CBS up until just 2 months ago.
Oh, exactly. And they brought in Bari Weiss, and they've changed their, before, and everybody, it's just not me, every analysis of that case said that case had no merit, none. And yet 60 Minutes, CBS caved in. Why did they cave in? In large part because of Skydance was trying to merge with 60 Minutes, and they needed permission from the Trump administration. Otherwise, it could be blocked by the FCC or FTC. So, they were
trying to merge with Paramount. You mean not with 60 Minutes?
Yeah, 60 Minutes is owned by Paramount. CBS, 60 Minutes. CBS is owned by Paramount. Paramount was trying to merge with Skydance, and so that's why they caved in, supposedly. That's the only explanation people can think of, because the case seemed to have no merit. And so now you have a partners, friends of the administration and the Ellisons, who owned Oracle, own Skydance, and now own Paramount, and are going to own TikTok. And as we talked last week, there is it is somewhat remarkable how there's a boys club that has access to the administration and the Gulf states, the money there, and they are buying up everything, and they are working together to basically, like the octopus arms from the old, Standard Oil monopoly images. They're working to take over all the industries or related industries in a large number of, I guess they're trying to take a business in a large number of industries. So you have TKO, who's partners with these guys. TKO owned by Silver Lake that's partnered with the Emirates, and Oracle, the Ellersons, to purchase TikTok. Silver Lake, who owns the majority of Endeavor. I mean, just the connections are almost incestuous at this point, and the same group of people are owning all this stuff, and so it's amazing. And again, you sit back and you can't help but wonder, how much did that play a part in this story by 60 Minutes? Was the word sent out to be very kind to this person because he is a friend? He's a good fella.
Speaking of buying up everything, they just bought EA Sports for $55
billion. Exactly, the same people. the same people again. This time it was the Saudis, PIF, Kushner, Jared Kushner, the son-in-law Trump again, and Silver Lake. So it seems to be a small group of firms are doing everything, getting sweetheart deals, and then we can't ignore too the fact that the TikTok deal seems like a hell of a sweetheart deal they got. So
this feels like Hydra from Marvel. From Marvel Comics.
Yes. I suggest everybody go look up the old Monopoly octopus.
Yes.
Because that's the image, and that's a very Hydra-like image. Tentacles and everything.
Now, someone that you know and I know, Jason Cruz, a.k.a. Dilettante on Blue Sky. He used to be Dilettante on Twitter, but someone stole his account. And boy, that is definitely not the dilettante you're looking for now. But anyways, Jason Cruz, formerly of Show Money with you and with what's his name?
Paul Gift.
Paul Gift.
MMA
yes.
Analytics. Yeah.
Yes. He surmised over on Blue Sky that the folks at TKO and the magnets that they keep company with might be looking to make Dana an eventual GOP candidate for a future presidency. Do you think that theory holds water? To access the bonus content of this episode, you must be a paid subscriber. To do that, go to heynottheface.substack.com and subscribe today.
Ow! Ow! Not the face! Ooh! Ooh! Okay, the face!